The soft hum of medical machines filled the quiet hospital room, their steady beeping the only sound breaking the silence. A small boy lay in the hospital bed, his tiny fingers clutching a sketch pad filled with drawings. His name was Jake, a 10-year-old with eyes too bright for the world he had been confined to. The walls around him were covered with pictures, some of superheroes, some of wrestlers, and in the middle, two faces stood out. One belonged to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the other to Barron Trump. They were his heroes, the ones he admired not just for their fame, but for what they represented: strength, resilience, and kindness. Jake had always been a fighter. Born with a rare heart condition, he had spent more time in hospitals than playgrounds, more time with doctors than kids his own age. Yet, he never complained. Instead, he dreamed. He dreamed of running like other boys, of playing soccer without gasping for breath, and more than anything, of meeting the two people he looked up to the most. His mother, Sarah, would often find him whispering to the posters on his wall, telling them stories as if they could hear him. "Mom," Jake would say, his voice laced with excitement even on his weakest days. "Do you think the Rock is really as strong as they say?" Sarah would smile, brushing a hand over his forehead. "I think he's even stronger than that. And you, my love, are the strongest of them all." Jake would laugh, though sometimes when the pain got too much, his laughter would fade into a wince. But he never let the darkness win. Even on the toughest days, he kept his spirits high. He believed in miracles. He believed that maybe, just maybe, if he wished hard enough, his heroes would somehow know he existed. What he didn't know was that his life was about to change in a way he had never imagined. Sarah sat beside Jake's hospital bed, her fingers lightly tracing circles on his hand. She had lost count of how many nights she had spent in that chair, watching over him as he slept. The doctors were doing everything they could, but some battles weren't just about medicine. They were about willpower, about hope. And Jake had plenty of both. She had always admired her son's resilience. Even on days when his body betrayed him, when he could barely lift his head off the pillow, he still found a reason to smile. He would tell jokes to the nurses, ask his mother about her day, and most of all, talk about his dreams. "I know I'll meet them one day, Mom," he would say, his voice steady, his eyes full of belief. "The Rock and Barron, it's gonna happen." Sarah never had the heart to tell him otherwise. She wanted to believe it too, wanted to hold on to the idea that something magical could happen, that the universe would hear her little boy's wish. But reality had never been kind to them. Raising Jake alone had been a struggle from the beginning. Medical bills piled up faster than she could pay them, and working long shifts at the diner left her exhausted. But she never let Jake see her worry. He had enough to deal with. Her job was to make sure he felt safe, to make sure he never lost that hope that kept him going. Some days were harder than others. There were moments when Jake's pain became unbearable, when his normally cheerful voice turned weak, and all Sarah could do was hold him close and whisper, "I'm here. I've got you." Those were the nights she prayed the hardest. Not for miracles, not for the impossible, just for more time. But through it all, Jake never gave up on his dream, and neither did she. One evening, as Sarah sat by Jake's bedside, exhausted from another long day, a soft knock on the door broke the silence. It was Emily, one of Jake's favorite nurses. She always had a way of making him smile, whether through funny stories or silly faces. But tonight, there was something different about her. She looked hesitant, almost nervous. "I need to show you something," she said, holding up her phone. Sarah leaned forward as Emily tapped the screen, revealing a post. A picture of Jake holding his sketch pad, his frail hands gripping onto the drawings of Barron Trump and The Rock. The caption read, "This brave little warrior has one wish, to meet his heroes. Let's make it happen." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Emily, you posted this?" Emily nodded. "I had to. People need to hear Jake's story." Sarah wasn't sure how to feel. She had always been protective of Jake, keeping their struggles private, never asking for handouts. But as she scrolled through the comments, her heart pounded. The post was spreading like wildfire. Hundreds of people had shared it. Some were tagging celebrities. Others were leaving words of encouragement. Jake, who had been resting, stirred and blinked up at them. "Mom? What's going on?" Sarah hesitated, then handed him the phone. His tired eyes widened as he read through the comments. A slow smile spread across his face. "People are actually talking about me?" Emily grinned. "Not just talking. They're making sure your story gets heard." Jake clutched the phone like it was something sacred. For the first time in a long time, there was a new kind of light in his eyes, one that had nothing to do with his illness and everything to do with hope. What none of them knew was that somewhere, beyond the walls of this small hospital room, the right people were about to take notice. The post continued to spread, reaching more people than anyone had expected. Within hours, it was being shared across different platforms, gaining thousands of likes and comments. People from all over were tagging Dwayne, the Rock, Johnson, and Barron Trump, hoping they would see it. Then something incredible happened. Late at night, Sarah's phone buzzed with a notification. She rubbed her tired eyes and glanced at the screen. At first, she thought she was dreaming. But no, there it was, clear as day, a direct message from an official account. Not just any account, Dwayne Johnson's. Her hands shook as she opened it. "Hey Sarah, I just saw Jake's story. Tell him he's got a new friend. I'd love to meet him. Let's make it happen. Stay strong." Sarah gasped, her heart pounding. She covered her mouth, trying not to wake Jake. Was this real? Was the Rock really reaching out to them? It felt impossible, yet here it was. Before she could process it, another notification popped up. This time, it was an email. Her breath caught as she read the sender's name, Barron Trump's assistant. The message was short, but just as powerful. "Barron would love to visit Jake. Let us know how we can arrange it." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. This was actually happening. She looked over at Jake, still asleep, his sketch pad resting on his chest. He had dreamed of this moment for so long, never knowing how close it was. She wanted to wake him, to tell him everything, but instead she just sat there, holding her phone tightly. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel powerless. Help was coming. Hope was real. And soon, Jake's dream would no longer be just a dream. The morning light streamed through the hospital window, casting a soft glow over Jake's bed. He stirred awake, stretching his weak arms, unaware that this was not going to be just another ordinary day. Sarah sat beside him, barely containing her excitement. She had spent the entire night finalizing details with the hospital and keeping the biggest secret of their lives. "Morning, champ," she said, brushing his messy hair from his forehead. Jake yawned and blinked up at her. "Morning, Mom. Why are you smiling like that?" She bit her lip, pretending to act normal. "Oh, no reason. Just, I think today's going to be special." Before Jake could question her, there was a knock at the door. A nurse peeked in, a wide grin on her face. "Jake, I think you have some visitors." Jake frowned in confusion as the door swung open. At first, his mind couldn't process what he was seeing. Standing there, larger than life, was none other than Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. His towering frame filled the doorway, his signature smile bright as ever. And right beside him was Barron Trump, dressed casually but carrying an energy of quiet kindness. Jake's heart nearly stopped. His breath hitched, and for the first time in his life, words completely failed him. The Rock took a step inside, his deep voice breaking the stunned silence. "Well, well, well. I heard there's a tough little dude in here who's been looking for me. Jake's hands trembled as he gripped the blankets, his eyes darting between his heroes. Is this real? Barron chuckled, stepping forward. It's real, buddy. He pulled out a gift bag and set it beside Jake. We thought we'd come by and say hi. Tears welled in Jake's eyes, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from the overwhelming joy surging through his little body. His dream, the one he had wished for so many times, was right in front of him, and it was even better than he had imagined. Jake's hands still trembled as he reached for the gift bag Barron had placed beside him. His mind was spinning. Was this really happening? Was he actually sitting in his hospital bed staring at the Rock and Barron Trump like they were just two regular people who had come to visit? The Rock pulled up a chair and leaned in, resting his massive arms on the side of the bed. So, Jake, I gotta ask, who wins in a wrestling match, you or me? His eyebrows lifted playfully. Jake let out a breathless laugh, still overwhelmed. I mean, you're pretty strong, he admitted. But I've been training in my dreams, so maybe me? The Rock threw his head back, laughing. I knew I was in trouble the moment I walked in here. He reached into a bag he had brought and pulled out something wrapped in black cloth. When he unwrapped it, Jake's eyes went wide. It was a championship wrestling belt, signed in silver marker. This belongs to the real champ, the Rock said, handing it to him. Jake hesitated before taking it, his hands barely able to hold on to the weight of it. This is mine? His voice cracked with disbelief. All yours, buddy, the Rock said, tapping Jake's shoulder. Only the strongest get one of these. Barron, who had been quietly watching with a warm smile, leaned in. And that's not the only thing we brought, he said, pulling out a folded piece of paper. I wrote you something. Jake carefully unfolded the letter. His eyes darted across the words, and with each line his lip quivered. It was filled with encouragement, with words of strength, telling him that he was braver than most adults, that his fight was inspiring, and that no matter what, he wasn't alone. Jake clutched the letter to his chest. His voice was barely above a whisper. This is the best day of my life. Sarah, standing beside him, wiped a tear from her cheek. For the first time in forever, she saw something in Jake's eyes she hadn't seen in a long time. Pure, undeniable joy. The room felt warmer now, filled with laughter, stories, and the kind of energy Jake hadn't felt in a long time. For a boy who had spent most of his life in and out of hospital beds, this moment was nothing short of magic. His heart condition, the pain, the exhaustion, it all seemed to fade into the background as he sat there, surrounded by the two people he had only ever dreamed of meeting. The Rock leaned back in his chair, studying Jake with admiration. You know what, kid? I've met a lot of tough guys in my life. I've fought in the ring, trained with the best, but I gotta say, I think you might be the toughest of them all. Jake's face lit up. You really think so? No doubt about it, the Rock said, giving him a fist bump. You're stronger than you know. Barron, sitting on the edge of the bed, nodded. And no matter what happens, you've got all of us in your corner. You're never alone in this fight. Jake glanced down at the championship belt resting on his lap, then at the letter still clutched in his hand. He had never felt this seen, this important. He had always been the kid in the hospital, the one doctors whispered about in hallways, the one who felt small in a world that kept moving without him. But today, for the first time, he didn't feel small. He felt unstoppable. Sarah watched from the side, her heart full. She had spent years wishing she could take Jake's pain away, wishing she could give him something to hold on to when the nights got long and the fear crept in. And now, seeing her son smile, really smile, she knew this moment would stay with him forever. Before the Rock and Barron left, they both leaned in close. Promise us one thing, Barron said. Jake nodded quickly. Anything. "Keep fighting," The Rock said. "You're not just a warrior, Jake. You're a legend in the making." Jake swallowed hard, his eyes glistening with tears. "I promise." And in that moment, he meant it with everything he had. In the days that followed, something inside Jake changed. The visit from the Rock and Barron Trump had given him more than just gifts and kind words. It had given him strength. A new kind of fire burned inside him, one that made him believe he could fight harder than ever before. The doctors noticed it first. His energy levels seemed better, his spirits higher. Even on the toughest days, when the treatments wore him down, he would clutch the championship belt beside him and reread Barron's letter like it was his personal battle cry. The hospital staff, who had always admired Jake's courage, saw the difference. He smiled more. He joked more. He even started challenging the nurses to arm wrestling matches, claiming he had been training under the Rock himself. His laughter filled the halls, reaching patients who needed to hear it just as much as he did. Word of his meeting spread far beyond the hospital. People from around the country began following his journey, sending messages of support and donations for his treatment. Strangers who had never met him were rooting for him, lifting him up in ways he had never imagined. And Sarah, oh Sarah, she had spent so long carrying the weight of worry, fearing the worst. But now she saw something she hadn't seen in years. Hope. Jake's fight wasn't over, but for the first time it felt like the world was fighting alongside him. One evening, as she tucked Jake in, he looked up at her with sleepy eyes and whispered, "Mom, I think I really can do this." She brushed his hair back, swallowing the lump in her throat. "You always could, baby. You just needed to believe it." And now, finally, he did. Jake's story didn't just stay within the walls of his hospital room. It traveled far beyond, touching hearts everywhere. People who had never met him felt connected to his courage, inspired by his unwavering spirit. His fight became a symbol of hope, reminding the world that even in the darkest moments, kindness and belief could change everything. The Rock and Barron Trump continued to check in on him, sending messages of encouragement, making sure he knew that he wasn't alone. Jake held on to their words like armor, using them to push through the hardest days. His doctors, once cautiously optimistic, began to see real progress. His body responded better to treatments, and every small victory felt like a step toward something bigger. Donations poured in, covering medical costs that had once felt impossible to manage. More than that, the love from strangers gave Sarah something she had never dared to hope for: relief. She no longer carried the burden alone. The weight that had pressed on her shoulders for years was finally easing, replaced by something lighter, something stronger. One day, as Jake sat with his sketch pad, drawing yet another picture of his heroes, he looked up at his mother and grinned. "You know what, Mom? I think one day I want to be someone's hero too." She smiled, her heart full. "You already are, baby." Because heroes weren't just the ones in movies or on TV. Sometimes they were 10-year-old boys with unbreakable spirits. Boys like Jake, whose story would live on long after this moment, reminding the world of the power of hope, love, and the belief that no dream was too big. Jake's story is a reminder that kindness, hope, and belief can change lives. If this touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more incredible stories. And before you go, check out the videos appearing on your screen. You won't want to miss them. See you in the next one.